They came to see the world's best jets, the Eurofighters, the Raptors, the Typhoons. But when Pakistan's JF-17 Thunder rolled onto the tarmac, the UK crowd chuckled. Some even called it a cheap knockoff. No one expected it to last 5 minutes in the sky. But what happened next silenced every skeptic and left jaws hanging across the Royal Air Tattoo. The Royal International Air Tattoo in the UK isn't just any air show, it's the Super Bowl of military aviation. Every year, the biggest names in the skies take center stage. The F-35 Lightning, the Eurofighter Typhoon, even vintage Spitfires still roaring like legends. So when the announcer said, "Up next, the JF-17 Thunder from Pakistan," a ripple of polite applause swept through the stands, followed by laughter. Phones were lifted not to film in awe, but to capture what they thought would be a disaster in the making. A British teen in the front row leaned over and joked, "Mate, is that thing made of plastic?" Others scoffed, "Third world tech. It won't pull half the G's the Typhoon did." Even the announcers sounded dismissive. Their tone was clinical, almost bored. But across the tarmac, inside the cockpit, 2 Pakistani pilots sat stone-faced. No nerves, no need to prove anything. Because they weren't here for applause. They were here for history. As the Thunder's twin wheels rolled forward and its canopy sealed, the crowd still wasn't impressed. Until the engine screamed alive with a sharp, unexpected roar. Not soft, not sluggish, but fierce and rising. It wasn't the toy they imagined. It was about to become the ghost that silenced the sky. And as the Thunder lifted off, the crowd still didn't know. What was coming at 18,000 feet would rewrite the day and leave the UK airshow stunned. Do you think the West still underestimates Asian aviation? The jet rose like it had something to prove, but flew like it didn't need to. Within seconds of takeoff, the JF-17 Thunder snapped into a vertical climb, its engine howling against the cloudy British sky. That's when the laughter stopped. Not because the crowd wanted it to, but because the sound demanded silence. The jet peeled into a tight cobra turn, nose rising beyond vertical, then flattening in perfect control. It wasn't just a maneuver, it was a message. We're not here to impress you. We're here to make you remember us. An RAF officer watching from the tarmac lowered his binoculars slowly. He muttered, "That's not supposed to be possible. Not from that platform." The crowd was starting to lean forward now, phones raised again, but this time trembling. No more jokes, no more chuckles, just mouths opening and staying that way. Then came the roll. A blistering, high-speed barrel roll over the airfield, flawless, aggressive, with a full afterburner tail trail glowing like a comet. At 15,000 feet, the JF-17 suddenly nosed down and executed a simulated strike run, the kind you only see in live combat drills. And just before it ended, it hovered. Not literally, but with such controlled precision that it appeared to pause mid-air. You could hear someone in the crowd whisper, "This isn't the same Thunder we've seen before." And they were right. This wasn't a parade version. This was the Block 3, equipped with cutting-edge avionics, AESA radar, and a pilot who knew exactly how to fly it like a scalpel through the clouds. As the jet banked left and prepared to land, the announcer's voice returned, this time with a tone no one expected. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was the JF-17 Thunder, and it just earned your silence." But the story didn't end when the wheels touched the ground. In fact, that's when the most unexpected moment happened. One the cameras didn't catch, but the insiders never forgot. What do you think the Western pilots whispered backstage after that display? Stay with us. Because in Next, where things get personal, after the display ended, the crowd gave polite applause. But behind the scenes, there was a different kind of noise. Not cheers, whispers. Inside a restricted hangar tent, several NATO and RAF officers gathered around a monitor replaying the Thunder's demo. Frame by frame, maneuver by maneuver. One British pilot, a seasoned Typhoon flyer, leaned forward and tapped the screen. Look at the angle on that turn. That's not pilot luck. That's airframe control and deep software sync. Another added, and that thrust vectoring? I didn't think they had that tech operational yet. No one laughed anymore. Outside, the Pakistani crew walked back toward their staging area. No selfies, no flag waving. Just quiet pride, like warriors who had already seen battle and didn't need to win anyone's approval. A reporter from an aviation blog tried to press in for a quick interview. Sir, were you expecting that kind of reaction from the UK crowd? The Pakistani pilot gave the smallest smile. We weren't here for reaction. We were here to fly. The video clip of that single quote, just 6 seconds long, went viral within hours. By evening, hashtags were trending. Thunder silenced UK, JF-17 over UK, not just a warjet. But what truly flipped the narrative was what happened the next morning. An unofficial RAF memo leaked online. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't condescending. It was admiring. The note praised the JF-17's maneuverability, its electronic warfare suite, and even referred to the demo as a surprise highlight of Riot 2025. One line stood out in particular. Pakistan's aircraft may no longer be underestimated, not by us. That sentence, coming from the same military that once dismissed the Thunder as a budget-tier fighter, was everything. Respect isn't granted in defense circles, it's earned. And the JF-17 had just earned it. In the hardest sky of all, British airspace. But while the public saw airshow theatrics, there was a deeper layer, a silent message between nations, one understood only by those in uniform. And it all came down to the final maneuver, one that wasn't meant to impress, but to signal. What do you think that final banking turn really meant? As the JF-17 Thunder prepared to exit the British airspace, there was one final move, quiet, quick, almost invisible to the casual viewer. But to those who understood aviation, it spoke louder than the sonic boom it didn't make. It was a wide, sweeping right bank, angled directly over the UK's historic RAF memorial line. A tribute turn. A respectful arc across a sky once ruled solely by Spitfires, Hurricanes, and British pride. And yet this modern fighter from Pakistan carved through that same airspace, not in defiance, but in dignity. That maneuver wasn't for claps, it wasn't for show. It was a salute to history, to struggle, to how far the underdog had come. Inside the VIP tent, an older RAF group captain stood in silence. He'd served during the Cold War, flown over Afghanistan, spent years dismissing Pakistan as a second-tier air force. But as the Thunder vanished into the clouds, he turned to his junior and said quietly, "Tell the lads in intel, we need to start paying closer attention." Across social media, reaction was explosive. What started as a May jet had become the most talked-about aircraft of the event. Aviation forums lit up with posts like, "How did the Thunder pull off a better show than half the NATO fleet? JF-17 Block 3 might just be the MiG-21 of this generation, underestimated and lethal." But beyond the noise, a bigger truth emerged. Pakistan hadn't just flown a jet. They had flown a message that said, "We build, we fly, we rise." Not to dominate, but to be recognized. And that's exactly what happened. In a sky filled with giants, it was the so-called budget fighter that left the deepest echo. Not because it was the loudest, but because when it roared, the whole sky went silent. They mocked the thunder before it took off. But by the time it landed, they were no longer laughing. They were steening. What do you think this flight meant for Pakistan's aviation future? Will the world ever look at the thunder the same way again? Comment your thoughts. And if you felt proud hearing this story,